Hello everyone, welcome to YK Reviews. With Ghostbusters now completely out the way, we start turning our focus to the Monsterverse with Godzilla x Kong coming out later on this week. So we're going to start breaking down all the movies retrospective style, with today being Godzilla coming out in 2014. So let's dive right into it. If you are new to the channel, you do like these type of retrospective reviews, we've done a whole bunch of them. Like I mentioned, we just finished the Ghostbusters retrospective reviews with the tier ranking video, so you can check that out on the channel, as we're going to be working towards Godzilla x Kong. So fresh haircut for the boys. We've got Gabuman entering the family here, so let's talk about Godzilla. Because with this movie, I honestly really enjoyed this movie, and I still do. Rewatching again, I had such a great time with it. Only problem I have now is that after watching Godzilla -1, that movie, I've got such a high standard with it, and it's just an incredible movie that even to this day, one of the best kaiju, one of the best Godzilla movies out there. This one, in terms of the human aspects, in terms of like the non-Godzilla characters, it's just a lot of like night and day differences here. But Godzilla -1 is just like a step above compared to every other like Godzilla movies out there, in my personal opinion. With this one though, I still think it holds up to this day, because when it comes to like these Monsterverse movies, I do enjoy them for what they are at this point. Because right now, like in terms of like the Godzilla x Kong movie, that one most likely just being pretty much like a tag team SmackDown main event type of situation with Godzilla and x Kong. You even have like advertisements of like those old school style type of SmackDown artwork that you get for like advertising the main event. That's pretty much what it is. It's just like beyond ridiculous now at this point, with them fighting one another and how everything's going about. So I'm just taking it like that. But when it comes to the Godzilla movie, the one that kicked off the franchise, I mentioned it in my Monarch series review, and I'll probably bring it up when it comes to like certain elements in the movies. These movies, after watching the Monarch show, has kind of elevated certain characters, elevated the movies quite a bit. Because when it comes to this movie, with the opening sequence, you've got the time frame, the time set, it's 1999, they're in the Philippines, at like this dig site where you've got Dr. Serizawa and his, I believe it's assistant or colleague, I'm not sure exactly the relationship that they have going on there. They go underground to this dig site, they're looking at these fossils underground, only to see that something has escaped with like this mark, this trail on the floor. And we come to see that it's leading towards Japan, where we get introduced to one of like the surprise casting that they had in this movie, with Bryan Cranston in the movie in the role here. So we get introduced to him and his family dynamics. So you've got his son Ford, you've got his wife, so it's apparently his birthday today, so him and his wife going into this factory, the power plant where they're working at, in which they're noticing these seismic activities. So he sends his wife to the lower levels to go check out what's going on here, in which a breach has appeared, and so they need to contain the breach, they need to close it before it escapes to the rest of the population. Though the problem is that while Bryan Cranston's wife is down there, he's trying to make sure that she escapes. Obviously she's not able to make it in time, he has to close the door, and you get this great performance with Bryan Cranston. Obviously he's always killing it in his roles. This emotional sequence where he closes the door, you see his wife basically telling him to look after their son, so you just get this really emotional sequence in there. In turn, the power plant ends up just collapsing in itself because of this seismic activity, with air quotes I'm guessing, because we know exactly what happened here. So then we now cut to present day, or 2014 present day. It's 15 years later now, and so we get introduced to Ford as an adult, who's being played by Aaron Taylor-Johnson, another great casting choice. He is reuniting with his wife Elizabeth Olsen, and what's really weird, and the weird dynamic that you've got there, is that I believe is that you have Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen playing husband and wife in this movie, when a couple of years later they're going to be playing brother and sister in the MCU. So it's just really weird to get your head around it, just watching them like kiss, make up with each other. But Elizabeth Olsen gets this phone call. They find out that Aaron Taylor-Johnson's dad, Bryan Cranston, has been arrested in Japan, so he has to go fly back to Japan to go get his father out of jail, in which we see his house just filled with like billboards and posters and newspaper clippings all around the house, because he believes that it wasn't seismic activities, it wasn't a natural occurrence or whatever it was. His house also has been in the quarantine zone, which he's trying to break into, trying to get his data and everything like that. He manages to convince his son to go with him so that they can try to go back into the house, which they manage to do. He gets a picture of his wife, which he hasn't had for the last 15 years, but they end up getting arrested once again, taken to like this military base that's around the hole where the power plant used to be. And Bryan Cranston's going off, telling them about what's going on, telling them about these seismic readings and stuff, and that's where you see Dr. Tozawa, who was in the opening sequence, hearing this. They're actually getting the same exact readings that took place 15 years ago, and that's where we come to see that they've actually got this Muto laying dormant, absorbing all this radioactive material, and once he comes alive, he starts destroying the base, destroys everything in his sight. You actually see Bryan Cranston, who's actually on this balcony type of thing there. He falls into the rubble, but he's alive. He's taken into the helicopter to try and get some help, only for him to die in the helicopter in front of his son Ford, which I kind of think that it was a mistake having him die this early on in the movie, because this is one of the characters that you do really care about. You get invested, especially with his performance. So I kind of think that it was a mistake killing him off this early on, because you wanted to see that like recognition, you wanted to see the interaction and the relationship building with Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Bryan Cranston, because of that like fractured relationship from the last 15 years. So it was a shame that he got killed off so early on in the movie. But with Muto, who now has absorbed all the radioactive energy, he's now escaped, leaving the facility after causing so much destruction here. And that's where you see Dr. Zazawa and Ford, Aaron Taylor-Johnson's character, going to this naval US military base, in which we're getting this background, this lore explanation of Godzilla and these creatures there. You get a little bit of that in the Monarch show, which again is what I feel like has elevated these certain sequences, because you see that and you see the history, like for example like in World War II and all that kind of time period, they're like trying to destroy Godzilla, which you see it in the Monarch show. So I really love that element and how it was just like a full circle in there. And we come to find out that this Muto is still young. He's communicating with something or someone, so they're trying to figure out what that is, but they know that he's young, so he's still going to be growing, so they need to try and put a stop to it. So the military go looking after this Muto, coming to find out that he's actually stacking on this old Russian ship, absorbing the radiation. They tried to go attack it, only for this Muto to cause a huge EMP attack, everything going pitch black. And that's where we get our first sighting of Godzilla in the movie. Now granted, it did take a while for us to be able to see Godzilla, because you're focusing in on the human side of things here, which again, like I mentioned, when it comes to like Godzilla -1, comparing it to it, while you're not as emotionally invested with the characters as you are in Godzilla -1, because Bryan Cranston's character did get killed off, but you see the first sighting of Godzilla. He's coming in, he's causing this huge tsunami in the land because of his presence coming in, and you see Muto on this train track. Now Aaron Taylor-Johnson is there because he's trying to head back home. He's with this kid whose parents got lost because the door closed while they were on the train before they were able to get inside, so he's with them. The Muto is on the train track attacking the train when Godzilla arrives, and you see this tiny battle, but the focus is on the human side of things rather than the actual battle between Godzilla and Muto here. So we don't really get to see the proper fight of Godzilla and Muto. They end up at the airport base where you see Godzilla's foot in there, but then it sort of cuts away again, not really getting to see the full battle there. Cutting to the next morning with this destruction, and the boy is able to reunite with his parents after like the destruction and everything, and Aaron Taylor-Johnson's character ends up joining with the military to try and find out what's going on and try and stop these creatures. That's where Dr. Cesawa comes to find out that the creature, Muto, that's actually doing a mating call. So Godzilla was actually just eavesdropping on this mating call. This creature is trying to look for the bigger creature, so there's actually two Muto creatures that's on the loose here. So he's going to Vegas because that's where all the nuclear waste, like all the nuclear shit that is being dumped, is dumped in Vegas, and that's where Muto is going to absorb all of that nuclear waste, all of that radiation. And when it's in there, again, you don't really see the destruction. You sort of get it in like some helicopter footage, drone type footage, but just not really like a full live action in scope type of feel to it. Like again, it's sort of just in the background while these military people, while the human people are having this discussion of what they're going to do next. So you don't really get to see that destruction in Vegas. So what they decide to do, the humans, they decide to get Godzilla and the Mutos into one location around like the sea, so that they can drop this special type of bomb to try and eliminate all of them. So Aaron Taylor-Johnson's character, he's like a bomb specialist. He decides to join the military, like I mentioned earlier, and so they're on this train with this warhead to try and get this bomb going. But that's when Muto again arrives. He attacks the train. You have him and his other character trying to play possum, and you get this great little suspense sequence of them laying flat on the train tracks. You got Muto underneath the train tracks. You can see snippets of Muto's eyes as he's looking up trying to see who's alive, who's not. So there's some really great sequences in there and some great suspension that you get throughout this whole sequence. But then with this destruction that's being caused by Muto, all these soldiers end up dying apart from Aaron Taylor-Johnson's character, who actually ends up surviving, as the rest of the military who's doing this extraction for that warhead, they grab Aaron Taylor-Johnson, so they end up going to continue the mission of trying to get this warhead, trying to get this bomb going to kill off all these creatures. So then now you get this bridge sequence, which once again you see it in the Monarch show of San Francisco, the famous bridge in San Francisco. You've got all the military there, you've got the naval military, you've got the tanks, everybody's on the bridge, everybody's at the sea waiting, where Godzilla arrives. Again, you see the school bus sequence there with this driver trying to get out of the bridge. Godzilla's arriving, destroying some of the bridge. Muto then arrives. Muto and this other Muto get their calling done, get their mating in order, and that's where we get the third act, the big fight sequence between Godzilla and Muto, because it turns into like a 2-on-1 handicap match. You've got Godzilla versus the two Mutos in San Francisco fighting one another. The military are trying to arm this warhead, trying to blow them up. And honestly, the fight sequence that we finally get, the one that everybody's been waiting for the whole movie, it's such a great sequence with these two. You get Godzilla, you get Muto fighting one another, beating the crap out of each other, and that's what you really get an enjoyment out of throughout the whole movies in this franchise, is the fight sequences between the monsters, because that's what you're going in there for. So what was frustrating a little bit is that for most of the movie you get snippets of the fighting sequence, but if that's not the focus on, now it's finally the focus on the monsters fighting one another, beating each other up, and I just absolutely had a blast watching it. You do get the focus then on the humans, because you've got Aaron Taylor-Johnson's character, they got the warhead, they're arming it, it's all set to go, but Aaron Taylor-Johnson ends up shooting the eggs that the Mutos had, because they were guessing they were going to try and create more Mutos, so he ends up blowing all those eggs. That's when the Muto arrives to try and kill Aaron Taylor-Johnson's character, because he destroyed their eggs. And you get this amazing shot of the atomic breath, so like there's clouds, fog, everything inside, and then you just see this blue lighting come up as the atomic breath is getting loaded up, and the atomic breath just absolutely breathtaking. One of my favorite sequences with Godzilla is the atomic breath sequence, whether it's in Godzilla -1, whether it's in Godzilla vs. Kong, or Godzilla in this movie. The atomic breaths are just amazingly shot. He ends up grabbing the Muto's mouth and just shooting it inside the mouth. It was just a great way to kill off the Muto. And that's when Godzilla ends up collapsing because of exhaustion. Aaron Taylor-Johnson's arming the bomb, he's getting it ready, but of course they don't end up using it because the fight is over. Godzilla is being seen as the king of monsters. Aaron Taylor-Johnson gets rescued by the helicopter, and Godzilla eventually stands up and walks away from the destruction, goes back into the sea as he's being hailed as a kind of a hero, even though he caused so much chaos and so much destruction in San Francisco. But that wrapping up the movie, wrapping up the first entry into the Monsterverse, and again, a really enjoyable movie, one that I just have a blast going back with. Like, again, in terms of the human characters, you're not solely invested as much as you would be in like Godzilla -1, for example, but the human characters and the human side of things aren't like a boring story plot. You do get some interesting aspects with that story, but of course the third act, the big battle between Godzilla and Muto, is just an absolute blast that you have such a fun time with. So honestly, a really strong entry, and a movie, like I said, still holds up to this day with some amazing shots, some great fight sequence, some visual elements that really work well. So one I have a really great time with. So if you've seen the movie, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What are your thoughts about it? Did you enjoy it? Are you not a fan of it? What are your thoughts so far about the Monsterverse with the first movie? Please let me know down in the comment section below. But that about wraps it up for the first retrospective style review for the Monsterverse movies. Keep an eye out, because we're going to be reviewing Kong Skull Island next in the build up to Godzilla x Kong. But again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. This is YK Reviews. Peace.